My name is Rowan Pierce. And the last time I stood in that house, my mother looked me in the eyes and said, "Good luck losing, Rowan," as my sister smirked beside her. That night, I walked out with nothing but a duffel bag and a wallet that held exactly $47. No home, no plan, no family. All because of a lie so cruel it ripped the floor from under me. It was a Thursday evening, just after 9 p.m. The rain had already started, smearing the city lights into streaks across the car windows. As I returned from my shift at the design firm, the one no one in my family cared to ask about, I still remember the way the front door creaked slightly as I opened it, how the warmth of the hallway lights felt almost suspicious. Something was off. Too quiet. Too clean. It was the kind of silence that only came before disaster. And then, I saw them, Mom, poised like a queen near the fireplace, arms folded, jaw locked. Beside her stood my younger sister, Bree, legs crossed, nail polish perfect, expression smug like she was waiting for a show. Dad was there too, though you'd barely know it. He stood just behind them, eyes averted, the picture of cowardice. "Where have you been?" Mom asked, her tone already a verdict. I blinked, confused. "Work? Why?" Her lips curled slightly. "Is there something you'd like to confess?" The words hit like cold steel. Confess. My heart started racing. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Then maybe you can explain this." She reached down and lifted a sleek, black folder from the coffee table. Inside was a printed statement from her personal investment account. Highlighted, a transfer of $40,000, supposedly wired directly to a private account in my name. My name. "That's not mine," I said instantly. My voice cracked, and it wasn't fear. It was disbelief. I had never even seen the bank's logo before. "Interesting," Bree chimed in, her voice saccharine. "Because the transfer came from your work computer. IT traced the login directly back to your device." "That's not possible," I said, my voice rising. "I don't even have access to Mom's accounts. Why would I—" "People do desperate things," Bree interrupted, looking up from her phone with practiced pity. "You've been struggling, right? Rent, debt. Maybe you thought you could pay it back later." My breath caught in my chest. I turned to my father, the one person who had always been a silent observer. "You know I didn't do this," I whispered. "Please." He looked away, and that was it. No trial, no chance to defend myself. My mother's decision came down like a hammer. "You have 1 hour to pack your things. This house is no longer your home." No screams, no dramatic collapse. Just silence. Cold, clinical rejection. I walked to my room like a stranger in my own life. The bedroom I'd painted myself in high school now felt foreign, like someone else's nostalgia. Bree followed, arms crossed, leaning against the doorway as I shoved jeans and t-shirts into a duffel bag. "You always thought you were better than the rest of us," she said softly. "Now you'll learn what real failure feels like." I turned to her, shaking. "Why are you doing this? You know I didn't touch that money." She gave a casual shrug. "Doesn't matter. Mom believes me, always has." Then she leaned in, lips curling into a satisfied grin. "Good luck losing." That night, I stood in the rain, a bag over my shoulder, soaked through, my pride crushed under my sister's lies and my mother's blind belief. I slept in the back room of the design studio where I worked part-time. No bed, just an old couch and a pile of rejected prototypes for company logos. I didn't eat for 2 days. I spent every spare second obsessing over what went wrong, combing through emails, searching for something, anything, that could prove my innocence. But I never found it. Instead, I found something else. Resolve. Cold, sharp, and necessary. If they were going to believe I was a thief, then fine. I'd build a life so remarkable, they'd choke on their assumptions. I'd create something that didn't just prove them wrong, it would erase the version of me they tried to destroy. What no one knew, not Bree, not my mother, not even the few friends who stuck around, was that I'd been working on a side project, an app. A creative platform for independent designers that solved a gap I saw in the freelance market. I'd pitched it to investors 3 times already and been rejected each time. But now I wasn't afraid to fail anymore. Failure had already happened. I'd already lost everything I thought mattered. I quit the design firm 2 weeks later, took a leap, and used the last $200 in my account to buy a refurbished laptop off Craigslist and enough ramen to keep me alive for a month. I slept in the studio. I coded through the night. I taught myself business law by moonlight and drafted proposals at dawn. 6 months in, a silent investor found my prototype on a startup forum. We Zoomed from my phone, propped up against a paint can. I pitched him like my life depended on it, because it did. He transferred $200,000 by the end of the week. That's how it started. And 2 years later, I stood in the marble lobby of a building I owned. Not rented, owned. And that investment? It had grown into a $10 million valuation. My face graced magazine covers. My company, Mythos Creative, was disrupting everything from ad agencies to art platforms, but I never told anyone. Not a word to my family. I wanted them to believe I'd vanished. I let them carry the illusion. Let Bree think she won. Until I received a text from my cousin last week. A family celebration. A surprise birthday dinner for Bree. I RSVP'd, yes, because this time I wasn't coming to beg. I was coming to remind them exactly who they threw away. And if you felt that tension, the moment of betrayal, the chill of being exiled from the people you thought loved you, then stick around. Because what happened at that dinner will redefine revenge, legacy, and what it means to win. Don't forget to subscribe, because you won't believe what happens next. The day of Bree's surprise, birthday dinner came wrapped in gold and hypocrisy. The venue was one of those ultra-exclusive rooftop lounges in downtown Seattle, the kind where valet drivers wear suits and the waitstaff address you by your last name. The invitation had arrived by courier, thick with embossed lettering, the A. Pierce family crest stamped across the top like it still meant something. I stared at it for a long moment before sliding it into the drawer next to my trademark contract with Mythos Creative. The irony wasn't lost on me. Invited now, when they believed I was gone, invisible, defeated. It wasn't just an invitation, it was bait. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Because I wasn't attending as Rowan, the forgotten daughter, the blacklisted sibling. I was attending as the owner of the building they were about to walk into. They didn't know it yet, but the rooftop lounge, the Ember Line, was part of Mythos's expanding hospitality portfolio. A private acquisition, quietly finalized 2 months ago during my company's aggressive growth strategy. The ink on the purchase agreement was still drying when I realized what I'd be walking into, so I planned it carefully. Down to the glassware, down to the exact moment the lights would dim. If Bree had crafted her lie with elegance, I would deliver the truth with precision. When I arrived that evening, I didn't enter through the front like the others. I took the private elevator from the executive parking level. I watched them. From the security feed, Mom arriving in her signature gray silk dress, her hair coiled into that sharp bun that made her look like a boardroom general. Bree swept in next, laughing too loudly, draped in a dress she definitely couldn't afford, on her marketing assistant salary. And Dad, trailing behind as always, checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be. Not one of them knew that the moment their feet hit the polished marble of the Ember Line's entryway, they had stepped into my legacy. "Everything set?" I asked Lena, my operations director, through my earpiece as I adjusted my cufflinks, in the hallway just behind the dining room. "Yes, ma'am," she replied with a note of excitement. "They're seated, and they've started the champagne. Then it's time." I walked through the private corridor and emerged through a side entrance, unnoticed at first. The room was all glittering laughter and crystal chandeliers. ambient music floating above half-eaten amuse-bouches. My mother's voice carried through the room. She was talking about her latest fundraising gala. Bree was already holding court, accepting air kisses and compliments like royalty, until she saw me. Her smile froze. I didn't stop walking. I moved to the head of the table, her seat, and stood behind it, letting the tension catch like a flame. Conversations faltered. Glasses paused mid-air. "Sorry to interrupt," I said coolly, "but I believe we have a few things to discuss." "Rowan?" My mother's voice cracked with disbelief, her mask slipping just an inch. "What are you doing here?" "I thought I wasn't welcome," I replied. "But imagine my surprise when I found out you booked a party in my lounge." A ripple moved through the table. My aunt coughed awkwardly. One cousin whispered to another. Bree's fork clinked against her plate. "Your lounge?" she echoed, her voice thin. "Yes," I said. "The Emberline is owned by Mythos Creative, and Mythos belongs to me." There was a beat of stunned silence before I turned to Lena, who stood at the ready near the bar. "Go ahead." The overhead lights dimmed. A projector descended silently from the ceiling. Everyone turned to watch the screen that came to life with a video reel. My journey, in full color. From sleeping on the couch at the design studio to the first prototype launch. From the $200,000 seed investment to the multi-million-dollar funding round that made national news. Snapshots of award ceremonies, product launches, news clippings, headlines, interviews. Forbes' Next 100 Innovators. TechCrunch's top CEO under Eddie. And finally, the press release announcing the acquisition of the Emberline. As the final slide faded into my company's logo, I turned back to the table. Bree looked like she had just swallowed glass. My mother's jaw was clenched so tight I thought she might snap a molar. My father looked genuinely stunned. "You see?" I said, voice calm. "I didn't just survive. I thrived. Despite your lies, despite being cast out of my own home over a crime I didn't commit. I built something that none of you even imagined I was capable of." My mother stood up, her voice tight. "You had no right to ambush us." I smiled. "You had no right to destroy me. But that didn't stop you either." Bree's voice came, next brittle and small. "So what, this was revenge?" "No," I said slowly. "This is clarity." The room was thick with discomfort. Bree's friends, clearly unaware of the family drama, fidgeted and avoided eye contact. A few of them had even been gushing about Mythos minutes earlier, not knowing it belonged to the poor sister their host had so often mocked. "But since you're here," I added, "let me make it clear what happens next. You will leave this restaurant quietly. You will not speak to the press. You will not attempt to twist the narrative. Because I have documentation, emails, security footage, statements that can dismantle every single lie you ever spread about me." Mom stepped forward, trembling with fury. "You think money makes you powerful?" "No," I said with an edge that cut clean. "Truth does, and I own all of it now." Then I turned to Bree. "Happy birthday, little sister. I hope the gift of exposure is enough this year. You've given it to me so generously before." They stood, humiliated, gathering their coats. The guests whispered furiously behind napkins and champagne flutes. And as they disappeared through the doors they once believed they ruled, I remained behind, standing in my place, in my building, in my empire. But the most important move was still ahead, because the next day, something even more explosive would arrive in their inboxes, and that would change everything. The next morning, the fallout began exactly as I predicted, quiet chaos masquerading as polite curiosity. Bree's friends had flooded social media with carefully filtered photos from the night before, tagging the Emberline, gushing about the ambiance, the elegance, the mystery of the hidden message in the presentation. None of them had caught on fully, but the whispers had started. Someone sent me a screenshot of a group chat titled, "What Just Happened at Bree's Party?" Apparently, one guest thought it was a dramatic PR stunt by some tech exec. I smiled. Not wrong, but that wasn't the explosion. That came at 9 a.m. sharp. When Bree opened her inbox and found the email I had scheduled with surgical precision. Subject line, "The truth behind the lie." Inside was a detailed PDF, 6 pages long, breaking down the full financial audit I had commissioned a month after, getting kicked out of the house. The same audit that had quietly uncovered the paper trail Bree left behind when she stole $50,000 from our mother's corporate account and rerouted it through a shell business with my name attached. The fraud was clumsy. A novice's attempt to frame someone using an old personal bank login I hadn't used in over 2 years. And now, every transaction, every signature, every IP address tied to Bree's cover-up was laid bare, color-coded, dated, sourced. She'd forgotten one thing. I had built my empire on design and data, and I left no line unchecked. At 9:15, I received a call from my mother. I didn't answer. At 9:23, a message from my father appeared. "Please, Rowan, we need to talk." At 9:41, Lena messaged me from reception. "Your sister is downstairs, refuses to leave." I walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows of my corner office, staring out at the Seattle skyline as I thought about the last year. About every night I cried myself to sleep in the studio I rented above the abandoned print shop in Belltown. About how I took the last $1,400 in my savings and built a prototype for a digital workspace system that nobody wanted, until the moment everyone needed it. The betrayal hadn't just cost me a home, it had almost cost me my belief in people. But now, Bree was the one being shut out. And not by me. By reality. I turned back to my desk and pressed the intercom. "Send her in." She walked in looking nothing like the girl who had smiled so smugly the night she had me thrown out. Her designer bag hung limp in her hand. Her usually perfect hair was tangled at the edges. The gloss on her lips faded. Her confidence had shattered and the shards were visible in her eyes. "You went too far," she said, before the door even closed. "No," I replied, not looking up. "You did. I just gave you a mirror." Bree's voice cracked. "You didn't have to humiliate me? That was my birthday." I laughed bitterly. "You think that was humiliation? Try being kicked out by your own mother with a duffel bag and $37 to your name. Try sleeping on an office floor for 2 months, because no one believed you didn't steal money. You ruined my life, Bree. For fun. For sport." Her eyes flared. "You don't get it. Mom always compared me to you. Even when you had nothing, it was always, why can't you be more driven, more focused like Rowan?" I just wanted her to see me for once. "You could have tried honesty," I said. "You could have built something of your own." She swallowed hard. "You were always the golden child." I shook my head, finally standing. "No, Bree. I was the scapegoat. You just never noticed, because you were too busy trying to win a game I wasn't even playing." We stared at each other, the silence charged. I waited for the apology that didn't come. She waited for the forgiveness I wasn't ready to give. "I came here to say sorry," she muttered eventually. "But I see now. It doesn't matter." I walked past her to the door and opened it. "You're wrong. It matters. But not in the way you think. This isn't about revenge. It's about consequence." Before she stepped out, I added one last thing. "Check your bank account. The $50,000 is gone." She spun around, confused. "What?" "I donated it," I said simply, "to a scholarship fund for women in tech. In your name." "You..." "What?" "Why?" "Because I wanted the truth to matter. Even if you didn't." Bree didn't respond. She just turned, defeated, and left. I closed the door and leaned against it, breathing slowly. It wasn't over. Not really. There was still one more reckoning left, one that would hit harder than anything else so far, because later that night, my mother would learn the truth. And this time, there would be no defense, no Bree to hide behind, no lie to protect her pride. Just the truth, and the legacy she tried to destroy finally rising beyond her reach. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was nervous, because I was calculating. The truth was finally loose in the world, but the wound it left behind hadn't even started to heal. I could feel it opening further, deeper, rawer, as the reality of what came next set in. My mother, Lucinda, was the final piece in this house of mirrors. And tomorrow she would stand in front of the very truth she helped weaponize against me. At exactly 11 a.m., she stepped into the lobby of my headquarters. Her hair was still perfectly styled, her lipstick flawless, her expression unreadable. Behind those classic pearl earrings she wore only when trying to prove a point. I met her on the executive floor, where the air itself felt heavier, colder. She didn't ask for a hug. She didn't apologize. "You called me here," she said. "I'm listening." I gestured toward the glass-walled conference room, already set. A laptop waited on the center of the table, screen aglow, paused at the opening frame of a video. "File." She sat slowly, her movements deliberate, regal, still clinging to control like it was stitched into her DNA. "I'm not going to argue," I began. "I'm going to show you something. After that, you can decide what kind of mother you want to be." Lucinda didn't flinch. "I already know who I am." I clicked play. The video was a compilation, meticulously edited footage from internal audits, interviews, voice memos, screenshots of financial trails. Then came security camera footage. Bree's forged signatures captured in real time at the firm's downtown office. An overlay of the email chain between her and a shadow accountant, one who had flipped the second legal counsel, got involved. Lucinda's eyes didn't move from the screen. Her breathing didn't change. But I saw the shift, the faint twitch, in her jaw. The ripple under the surface. Then, at the 10-minute mark, I added something she hadn't seen before, something not even Bree knew I had. It was a voice recording from a year ago. My voice, broken, pleading. "Mom, please, I didn't do this. You have to believe me." Her voice had responded with terrifying calm. "Good luck surviving, Rowan. Maybe losing everything will finally teach you what real responsibility looks like." Lucinda slowly reached out and paused the video. "That's enough." "No," I said, my voice low. "It's barely started." I leaned forward. "You threw me away. Not because you believed I was guilty, but because you needed someone to blame. Someone to absorb the shame, the fallout. Because admitting Bree could be the problem would have shattered your illusion of the perfect family." Her lips pressed together. "You've made your point. What now? You want public humiliation? An apology in front of the board? A written statement?" "I don't want anything," I said. "I earned everything I have without you." Her mask cracked for just a second. "I protected this family." "No," I snapped. "You protected your name, your image. You watched your daughter get tossed onto the street and handed her 28 years of silence as a goodbye. You didn't protect a damn thing." The silence between us was loud. Then I reached into the folder beside me and pulled out the last page. The deed to the original house, the one I was kicked out of. "I bought it," I said. Her eyes narrowed. "I bought the house. Last month. Paid in full, under a holding company, and tomorrow the papers finalize." "Why?" "Because I wanted to reclaim the only place I was ever made to feel like nothing, and now I own it." Her voice was a whisper. "Are you kicking me out of my own legacy?" "No," I said, standing. "I'm reminding you whose legacy it really was." She stood too, the chair pushing back with a scrape. She looked older, Now, not just physically, but like a woman who had built her pride on a sandcastle and just watched the tide come in. "You think this makes you powerful," she said. "But power without family is lonely." I stared at her. "I think loneliness is waking up and realizing your mother loved her reputation more than her children." Lucinda's expression collapsed then. Her hand trembled slightly as she picked up her purse. "I didn't know," she murmured. "I didn't know Bree would go that far." "You didn't ask," I said. "That's worse." She turned away, her heels clicking against the tile. Just before the door opened, she hesitated. "Do you want me to come to the house tomorrow?" she asked, voice barely above a breath. "No," I said. "I want you to watch it from the outside, like I had. Too." And then she was gone. When the door clicked shut, I sank into the chair, exhausted. Not because of the confrontation, but because I had spent a year carrying that silence inside me. A silence so heavy it had calcified in my chest. Now, finally, it was cracked open. And what came next? That was the real storm, because tomorrow, the press would see the new owner of 17 Valecrest Lane, the same address where a girl once stood, soaked in the rain, holding a duffel bag and no future. Tomorrow, she would walk back through the gates as Thai, the woman who bought the house that threw her away. And if you think that's the twist, just wait for what happens next. Hit that subscribe button now. Because this story is far from over. The sky was a heavy gray, the kind that made everything feel like it was holding its breath. I pulled up in front of the house at 17 Valecrest Lane, no, my house now, and stepped out of the black SUV in silence. The front lawn had been manicured perfectly that morning. Fresh white roses lined the walkway. The stone path gleamed from a pressure wash, and the brass gate bore a new plaque. R. Everly, proprietor. But what stood out most wasn't the house. It was the people gathered outside it. Reporters. Camera crews. Neighbors in pressed collars and polite curiosity. And right in the center of them, like a bad omen made flesh, stood Bree. She hadn't seen me yet. She was pacing, nervous, her manicured hand tucked under her arm like she was trying to hold herself together. I paused at the gate, letting the moment breathe, letting her squirm. Then, when the silence was ripe, I stepped into view. Our eyes locked instantly. Bree froze, her lips parting like she'd just seen a ghost rise out of the ground she tried to bury it in. A flash of recognition, then disbelief, then something darker. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, storming up to meet me halfway up the path, her voice low but frantic. "I own this house," I replied calmly, handing a set of keys to the security guard beside me. "They'll be resetting the code in an hour, just so you know." "You're lying." I didn't flinch. "Look around, Bree. Do you think the media showed up because you posted an Instagram story about your new throw pillows?" She followed my gaze, finally taking in the flashbulbs, the camera drones, the curious faces of people from the country club crowd. And then it hit her. This wasn't a private affair anymore. "This is my home," she said, louder now, hoping the audience would side with her, that the echo of privilege might drown me out. "No," I said, walking past her up the steps. "It was the scene of a crime. And I just turned it into a statement." I turned to face the press, my voice measured, clear, strong. 1 year ago, I stood outside this house with nothing but a bag and a lie over my name. Today, I walk back, in as the legal owner. I was accused, discarded, humiliated, not by strangers but by blood. Bree lunged forward, whispering harshly, "You can't do this to Mom. You'll break her." I met her gaze. She broke herself the second she chose to believe you without a question. Then I turned back to the crowd. I've been silent for a year, building, healing, winning. And I didn't come here for vengeance. I came here to reclaim what was taken. My voice, my dignity, and the right to decide my own story. I could hear the murmurs ripple through the press. But Bree wasn't done. "You think this little show redeems you?" she spat. "You think money makes you clean?" "No," I replied. "But the truth does. And I have receipts. Literally." I raised a black folder in my hand and handed it to the first reporter. Inside was a full legal report detailing the falsified evidence, the transactions, and the recorded confession from one of Bree's collaborators, her ex, who had finally flipped under the threat of subpoena. "You're going to jail," I said, quietly. "Or you're going to disappear. Either way, this chapter ends now." Bree stared at me, and I saw it, the unraveling. Not just of a lie, but of a life built on one. She wasn't just angry anymore. She was afraid, because people were watching now, and there was nowhere left to run. She stumbled back down the stairs, her breath ragged, as Lucinda's car finally pulled up. I watched as my mother stepped out, dressed in black like she was attending a funeral. Maybe she was, only this one didn't involve a casket. Just the death of the fantasy she'd clung to for so long. She didn't say a word. She simply stood there, watching me, then watching. Bree, then turning slowly to the cameras. "I'd like to make a statement," Lucinda said. I froze. This wasn't part of the plan. She wasn't supposed to speak, but then she stepped forward and said something I'll never forget. "I made a mistake. I believed the daughter who lied, and I turned away from the one who needed me most. Rowan didn't steal anything. She was the one stolen from. Her place in this family, her reputation, her home. I failed her. And I don't expect forgiveness. I just want her to know. I see it now." The silence that followed was unlike anything I'd ever heard. It was heavy, grieving, reverent. Bree turned, stunned. She reached for Lucinda's hand, but my mother pulled it away. And then, for the first time in a year, I walked back into the house. But it wasn't a house anymore. It was a symbol of truth, of survival, of becoming everything they said I never would. The storm outside had shifted from wind to thunder, rolling, low, and relentless. Inside the estate, it was no different. The silence that followed my mother's public confession wasn't peace. It was a warning, a breath before the scream. That night, I stayed in the house. My house. Alone in the master bedroom, where the chandelier still flickered the same way it had the night I was cast out. But this time, I was on the other side of the door. I was the one with the keys, the one who locked it. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat at the grand piano in the corner of the room. The same one Lucinda had refused to let me touch growing up because you only play what you've earned. I let my fingers glide over the keys, slow and uneven until a melody formed. Grief and fury don't usually rhyme, but that night, they did. Then came the knock. It was past midnight when Bree banged on the door like she still had rights. I didn't answer. I let her knock again. And again. Then she shouted, "You're not done. Don't pretend this is over, Rowan. You can own this house. The press can love your sob story, but you will never erase me." Her voice cracked. She was unraveling. Beautifully. "You think being rich makes you right? That some investor gave you money because you're better? That your little truth tour means anything?" I stood on the other side of the door, breath calm, hand resting on the antique doorknob, but I didn't turn it. This was never about money, I whispered to no one. Because the truth? It never was. It was about being seen, about being believed, and about what it costs a person when their family picks convenience over character. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a message from a name I hadn't seen in years. Miles Harrington. My ex. The one person who had known me before everything fell apart. The one who left when I was lowest, claiming I'd become too bitter for my own good. His message was simple. We need to talk. It's about Bree. It's urgent. At first, I ignored it. What could he possibly say that I didn't already know? But then came the second message. She forged something in your name. Documents. Backdated contracts. Rowan, she's trying to spin this. She's building a case. I froze. Not because I was afraid. No, not this time. But because I knew exactly what she was capable of. The snake doesn't stop biting just because you cut off its tail. Within the hour, I was in a downtown office suite, sitting across from Miles in a high-rise conference room. He looked different, older, tired, less arrogant. She's planning to sue, he said, hands folded. Claims you used insider information to secure your funding, says you blackmailed her. I laughed, sharp and dry. Of course she does. That's the only story she knows how to tell. The victim one. He slid a folder across the table. She asked me to testify. To lie. Said she'd give me a share of the family trust if I backed her narrative. I opened the folder. Photos. Emails. A transcript from a voice message she'd sent him, drunk and sloppy. I just need her knocked down a few pegs. She always thought she was better than me. Let her drown in her own success. I'll smile at the funeral. I stared at the words. Why are you giving this to me? I asked. You could have stayed quiet. Miles sighed. Because I watched. You burn alone once. And I can't sleep knowing I helped light the match. He stood, slipping on his coat. Do whatever you need to. She's already lost, but she doesn't know it yet. Back at the estate, I made one call. To my attorney. Then I made another, to a journalist. And when both calls ended, I opened the file that had been waiting on my laptop since the day I got the first dollar from my investment. A folder titled, Contingency. Inside it, every interaction, every false accusation, every whisper campaign. My sister had tried to bury me, but I kept every shovel she used. That evening, I walked into the gallery event I was co-hosting with the foundation that backed my newest venture. The place was buzzing. Artists, founders, donors, press, but my eyes locked on one person immediately. Lucinda. She stood by the champagne tower, alone, watching me. She didn't approach, didn't speak, just raised her glass in silent acknowledgement. It wasn't an apology. But it was something. And then I felt it. Bree. She entered in a dark green gown, trying to command the room like she used to. But this time, the heads didn't turn. The whispers weren't admiration. They were curiosity, suspicion. Because 30 minutes before she arrived, the exposé had gone live. Inside the lie, the real story behind the Renard scandal, with quotes, evidence, audio. The lie she told about me was now front-page truth, about her. I stood at the center of the gallery, letting the cameras catch the moment when she saw the article on someone's phone. Let them capture her panic, her rage, her collapse. And for once I didn't feel anger, just release. The morning after the gallery event was unnervingly quiet. No headlines, no messages, no chaos, yet. But I knew better. Silence after a public downfall isn't peace. It's the inhale, before the scream. I stood on my balcony, looking out at the gray city skyline, coffee untouched in my hand. The article was out. Bree's scheme was exposed. My name had been cleared, not just in whispers or behind closed doors, but in the open, under the harsh light of truth. But the air didn't feel lighter. It felt charged, like something else was coming. And it did. At 9:13 a.m., I got the call. Rowan, you need to come down here. It was Evelyn, my lawyer. Her voice was steady but tight. Bree filed a countersuit this morning. I blinked, as if disbelief could somehow delay reality. On what grounds? She's claiming defamation. She's spinning the narrative that you manufactured the article as revenge. says the evidence was altered. A laugh escaped me. Short, bitter. Of course she is. Don't panic, Evelyn added quickly. It's weak. She has nothing to stand on. But that's not what this is about. It's a distraction tactic. Bree wasn't trying to win in court. She was trying to buy time. Control the narrative. Delay the consequences. I was tired of playing chess with someone who kept flipping the board. That night, I made a decision. If she wanted war, she'd get one. But it wouldn't look how she expected. It started with the press, an exclusive sit-down interview. My terms. My story. Not just about the lie or the lawsuit, but about what it meant to rebuild from betrayal. I talked about what it felt like to be erased by the people who claim to love you, about starting over with nothing, about creating something from scratch while everyone bet against you. It wasn't just a reputation defense, it was a blueprint, and people listened. The video racked up views in hours. The comments poured in, strangers telling me they saw themselves in my story, that they too had been scapegoated, disowned, disbelieved. My inbox filled with partnership offers, brand deals, invitations to speak. My name, once associated with scandal, had become a symbol of silent strength, of earned power. But Bree? She spiraled. First, she sent a cease and desist, then another. She claimed harassment, emotional distress. She even called Evelyn's office pretending to be someone else, fishing for updates, but it didn't work. We documented everything, and then came the real blow. Lucinda switched sides. She showed up at my door one rainy evening, umbrella in one hand, a flash drive in the other. She looked different, older, but not in a physical way. In the way someone looks when the scaffolding holding their life up finally crumbles. I can't keep pretending she's the victim, she said simply. I let her inside, no warmth in my voice. No welcome, just curiosity. She sat at my table, hands trembling as she plugged in the drive. You need to see this. Inside were years of records, voicemails, photos, messages, things I didn't even know existed. Evidence that Bree had been manipulating our parents long before the lie. Documents showing how she redirected inheritance clauses, siphoned trust fund money, even faked therapist notes to paint me as unstable. It wasn't a mistake. It was a campaign. Long-term. Strategic. She used me too, Lucinda admitted, her voice hollow. But I let her. I thought, if one of my daughters hated me, at least the other would need me. I should have felt something. Vindication, sadness, relief. But I didn't. I just nodded, took the drive, and said nothing, because that's the thing about trauma. You don't always get catharsis. Sometimes you just get the truth. And that has to be enough. The final act came quicker than I expected. Bree held a press conference. Yes, a press conference to declare her innocence. It was dramatic, theatrical, complete with crocodile tears and claims that I had weaponized the media against her. She even held up a framed photo of us as kids, trying to sell a story of betrayal. But what she didn't know was that just 2 hours later, I would be walking into a courthouse. With Evelyn, with Miles, with Lucinda. With the flash drive, we filed an official motion, fraud, slander, financial abuse, forgery. By the time Bree's victim tour hit the 6 o'clock news, the legal papers had already gone public. She didn't cry in front of cameras again. The backlash was swift. Endorsements pulled. Accounts frozen. Her attorney dropped her case less than a week later. I heard through Evelyn that she tried to board a flight out of state but got stopped. Too many legal flags. Too much heat. But none of that felt like a win. Not yet. The real victory wasn't in the courtroom. It came later. Quiet. Private. A letter. Arrived. No return address. Handwritten. Sloppy. From my father, He'd been watching, reading. He said he was sorry, not for what he did, but for what he didn't do. For not standing up for me. For letting fear of rocking the family boat keep him silent. "I see you now," he wrote. "I hope someday you'll let me say it in person. I don't know if I will, but maybe that's not the point." Because as I stood on the rooftop of my newest property that night, a luxury co-working space built entirely from my vision and capital, I realized something that I hadn't been able to see in all the chaos. I hadn't just survived Bree. I had outlived her. Her version of the past. Her version of me. The narrative she tried to write on my skin like it was permanent ink. But I'd rewritten every line. The rain came down hard the day I signed the final document. Not just rain, the kind of storm that makes the air smell like beginnings, like something is being washed away for good. I stood by the window of my office, pen still in hand, staring out at the glass-drenched city. Beneath me was the skyline I used to dream of when I was lying on a mattress on the floor, just days after being kicked out of my childhood home with nothing but a duffel bag and a cracked phone. I was 19, betrayed, alone, and broke. Now at 24, I had just finalized the acquisition of the company that funded my rise, the very venture capital firm that turned my app into a multi-million-dollar business. A full-circle moment, poetic in its symmetry. I didn't just succeed. I built something too big to ignore, even for the people who once chose to erase me. But the real closure didn't come from the balance sheets or boardroom wins. It came the day Bree walked into that courtroom with her hair limp and her pride gone, trying to talk circles around the evidence we'd compiled. Her voice, once the sharpest blade in my back, sounded like static, hollow, desperate. And when the judge read the ruling, when he pronounced her guilty of falsifying financial records, slander, and manipulation, I didn't cheer. I exhaled. That's what it felt like. Like after years of holding my breath, I could finally let the air back in. She was sentenced, publicly disgraced. But the truth? That wasn't the real ending either. It was the phone call I got 3 weeks later, from Evander, my father. He didn't apologize at first. He just asked softly if I'd be willing to have coffee. One conversation. No cameras, no expectations. He sounded like a man who'd realized too late that silence is its own kind of betrayal. I met him at a quiet bookstore cafe on a rainy Thursday morning. He looked older, smaller somehow, like the weight of years had finally caught up to him. We talked, not about the scandal, not about Bree, just about books. About the little things he remembered from when I was still his daughter, before fear and favoritism drove a wedge between us. And in that space, I realized something that shifted everything. Forgiveness doesn't always mean reconciliation. Sometimes, it just means releasing the version of yourself that waited for someone else to see your worth. I walked out of that cafe lighter, not because he changed, but because I did. That night, I found an old box buried in the back of my closet. Inside was a letter I had written the night I got kicked out, crumpled, tear-stained, begging for answers, for love, for validation. I didn't cry when I read it. I just folded it gently, placed it in the fireplace, and lit the match. Some things don't deserve to be held on to. That brings me here. Now. To you. If you've made it this far into my story, you already know this isn't just about revenge. It's not even about justice. It's about transformation. It's about the kind of growth that doesn't need applause. About standing alone in the dark long enough that you learn to glow without permission. About losing everything you thought, defined you, and realizing it was never yours to begin with. I want to talk to the ones who've been cut off, lied about, discarded by the people who should have loved them the most. The lesson I've learned? You don't need to prove your worth to anyone who can't see it. You don't have to shrink to fit someone else's version of your potential. You don't need to win them over. You need to win yourself back. There's power in the silence of starting over. In the grind no one claps for. In rebuilding piece by painful piece until the life they tried to take from you becomes the very legacy they can't deny. I didn't set out to become a symbol. I just wanted to survive. But somewhere between rock bottom and the boardroom, I became something else, undeniable. And you can too. If this story spoke to a part of you that's still healing, still hoping, still building, I see you. I was you. And I promise you this, the comeback is always louder than the betrayal. Let your life become the proof. And if you want to be there for the next story, the next twist, the next reckoning, make sure to subscribe to this channel. It's not just for me, it's for us. For every underestimated soul who's been waiting to rise. This isn't the end. It's the beginning of something powerful, something unshakable. Because the past doesn't define us. But what we do next, that's what the world remembers. So tell me, what's your next move? I'm listening. And I'll be here, cheering for you from the other side of the fire.